Hello everyone, welcome to Coding Alley. In this tutorial, we're going to have a look at strings in Python. So let's get started. Now, what are strings in the first place? Remember we talked about variables and the need for a program to be able to store data in the previous video? Well, data can be of many different types, one of which is text data. And the way we store this text data in a program is by using string data type. So how do you create a string? In Python, there are three ways in which a string can be created. First is by using double quotes. So for example, you define a variable x, and then in order to create a string, we first use a double quote, and then you can type whatever you want here, and then you're gonna enclose it in a double quote. So whatever is enclosed in these double quotes will be stored in a string object. Now you can also print x. There you go. The second way of defining a string is by using single quotes. So again, you start a string by typing a single quote, and then you can type whatever you want. This is another string, and then enclose this in a single quote, and then you can print this y, and there you go. Now there is another way of defining a string, and that is by using triple quotes. So for triple quotes, you can use 3 single quotes like this, or you can use 3 double quotes like this. And the reason you would want to use triple quotes is because it allows you to define a string that spans multiple lines. So for example, this is a long string that spans multiple lines. Isn't that cool? And then you're gonna put 3 double quotes again to indicate that this is the end of the string. Let's print it out. And sure enough, Python remembered all the places where we put a new line and printed back exactly as we had defined the string to be. At this point, I also want to show you that many strings have a single quote within them. For example, there is a single quote that we're using here. So if we have a string that has a single quote in it, then do not use this method to define it. Otherwise, Python will think, for example, let me say, if I type "isn't it cool" here, Python will know, okay, there's a single quote, so this is a string, and then ISN will be included in the string, but Python will encounter this here, right? So Python will think, okay, this is the end of my string, but that's not what you want, right? So it will say invalid syntax. How do you define this? Well, you can use either double quotes or single quotes. So for example, you start with a double quote, and then you can type "isn't it cool?" Now Python will say, okay, I encountered a double quote, so this is going to be a string, and then you can type whatever you want. So ISN, a single quote T, and then "it cool." Now you end it with a double quote. So this is where Python will know, okay, this is the end of the string, and this will work perfectly now. Great. Let's introduce another concept in Python, and that is immutability. So nothing too complicated here. Immutability just means that we cannot change the object once it has been created. Strings in Python are immutable in nature. So once a string is defined, we cannot change its value. So let's see some examples to understand what does immutability mean. Let's define a string, "welcome to Coding Alley." Now this is a string that is assigned to the variable s1, right? What if we'd say s1 equal to "welcome to coding"? What will Python do here? Will it change this particular string and remove the word alley from it? Or is it going to define a new string and then assign it to s1? Well, it's the latter case that is happening here. Python will not alter this particular string, but instead create a new string object entirely and then assign it to s1. Let's understand this again. So let's say you have a string, "this is fun," Now when you change this string to something else, for example s2 equal to this is super fun, what will happen? Python does not alter this particular string and add the word super in it. Instead, what Python does is creates a new string entirely and then assigns it to the s2 variable. And what happens to these previous strings then? Well, they are unassigned and then finally discarded by the garbage collector. We can even prove this by using id. So let's take a final example. s3 equal to some random string, and let's check the id of s3, and we have this particular value. Now let's assign another string, so some random string 2. If Python was changing this string and adding the letter 2 here, then the id should remain the same, right? But what instead happens is that Python creates an entirely new string in memory and then assigns the memory address to s3. So now when we say id s3, this is going to be different. So this was 6.4 and this is 3.6. That's all there is to immutability. Let's move on to another concept, which is string concatenation. So what does the word concatenation mean? It means to combine or add two things together. So how do you add two strings in Python? Let's say we have s1 equal to welcome to, and then s2, which is coding alley. So how will you combine s1 and s2 together? Combining or adding or concatenating two strings in Python is very simple. So let's define another variable s3, and to concatenate we simply use the plus operator. So s1 plus s2. Let's print it out to see if that really works. And sure enough, Python concatenated these two strings, so welcome to up to the space, and then coding alley. Let's take another example. Let's say we have string 1 equal to this is string 2 equal to super fun, string 3 equal to isn't it. Now we can combine it into string 4, and the way we're going to do that is string 1 plus string 2 plus string 3. Let's print it out. So print string 4. Now what is going to happen? Notice we haven't left any spaces here, right? So this is all going to be concatenated like this. So this is super because there is no space after is, so we combine these two words, right? Is and super. The same thing happens with fun isn't, because there is no space here. You can introduce space by saying string 4 equal to string 1 plus, and then you can define a string here with just a space. So string 1 plus, and then plus string 2 plus, and then give some space, and then plus string 3. And now let's print it out to see if that works. So print string 4, and this works for us. So what we did was we said, okay, Python, take string 1, concatenate that with a space, then concatenate that with string 2, concatenate that with a space again, and finally concatenate string 3. So what Python did was, this is space, super fun space, isn't it? That's all about Python concatenation. Very simple. And that's it for this tutorial as well. In the next video we'll be covering more topics related to strings, so be sure to watch the next tutorial as well. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, then please subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.